Principal mistreats a teacher, unaware her husband is a high-ranking cop. The sun was already high in the sky when Monica pulled into the parking lot of Riverside High. Her hands rested on the steering wheel for a second longer than usual. She looked up at the large brick building in front of her. New job, new town, new start. She took a breath, smoothed the yellow dress she'd chosen carefully that morning, and whispered to herself, "You've got this." She stepped out of the car, her leather portfolio tucked under one arm. The Georgia heat pressed down heavy and thick, but Monica walked with calm confidence. She was proud of the work she'd done over the last 15 years. Classrooms where kids felt seen, lessons that brought real growth. This new job wasn't just a transfer, it was a new mission. But as she walked toward the school doors, she heard a voice behind her. "You must be Mrs. Harris." She turned to see a tall, thin man in a gray suit that looked expensive but didn't fit quite right. He gave her a smile, but it didn't reach his pale blue eyes. "Yes, I am," Monica replied, offering her hand. "You must be Principal Greer." His handshake was brief, cold. "Welcome to Riverside," he said. "The board insisted we fill the position quickly." Monica kept her smile polite. "I'm excited to get started." Greer gave her a once-over, then added, "Though I have to say, you look a little different than I expected." Her smile didn't fade, but something twisted quietly in her stomach. She'd heard comments like this before, phrased just enough to sound innocent, but sharp enough to leave a bruise. "My experience aligns with my appearance, Principal Greer," she said gently. 15 years teaching in diverse schools, a master's degree, and a proven record. He nodded, though his expression didn't change. "Well, this isn't Atlanta. We have our own ways here." He turned and began walking toward the building. Monica followed, keeping pace, her eyes scanning the halls as they entered. The walls were lined with student photos, class after class of smiling faces, though something stood out. Almost all of them were white. "Your room's upstairs. 204, Greer said flatly as they climbed the stairs. "I should also mention, there have been some concerns about your teaching methods." "My methods are backed by research," Monica replied. "They support all kinds of learners." Greer stopped at the top of the stairs and looked at her. "This community prefers a more traditional approach. We value structure and simplicity." They reached her classroom. Bright open windows let sunlight pour in. Monica's heart lifted a little despite the tone of their conversation. She could already picture how she'd make this space warm and inviting for her students. But Greer's voice cut through the moment. "I notice you're wearing a bold color. We usually prefer more muted tones in our dress code. Navy, gray, more professional." Monica turned to him, steady. "I dress professionally. I also believe that warmth and personality help kids feel safe." He narrowed his eyes slightly. "Well, we'll see how that works out." Then, with a look at his watch, he said, "Faculty meetings in the library. Don't be late. Punctuality is part of our values too." Monica waited until he walked away before she exhaled. She moved to her new desk, set her bag down, and pulled out her phone. A message from Elijah lit up the screen. "Hope your first day is amazing, beautiful. You're going to change lives. Love you." She smiled, texting back quickly. "Love you too. It's different here. But I'm ready." As she began unpacking her classroom materials, colorful, posters of writers, scientists, artists from all walks of life, Monica felt her calm return. She had done this before. She had faced worse. No one's cold smile or passive-aggressive tone could shake her reason for being here. The school might be old, and some of the people stuck in their ways, but the students would come in fresh. They would come with open hearts and minds. She would meet them where they were, and she would show them, through books, through kindness, through truth, that they belonged. And maybe, just maybe, she'd show this school that there was more than one way to teach, and more than one kind of teacher worth listening to. The next morning, Monica arrived early. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the halls of Riverside High were already starting to stir. Custodians were mopping floors, the front office light was on, and a few teachers passed by her in silence, giving tight nods but not much else. She smiled anyway. Kindness, even unreturned, was her quiet form of resistance. As she unlocked her classroom door, she paused for a second, breathing in the stillness, the quiet before the day began. She looked around. The desks were exactly where she'd placed them yesterday, in small, thoughtful groups meant to encourage student conversations, not stiff rows like most other rooms. She moved to her desk and began unpacking more of her materials. Laminated quotes from famous authors, photos of cultural leaders, colorful learning charts. On the whiteboard, she wrote in large, friendly letters, "You belong here." But just as she stepped back to admire her setup, there was a knock on the door. Principal Greer stood there, arms folded. No good morning, no hello. "I see you've decorated," he said, stepping inside without waiting. Monica smiled, standing tall. "Yes. I want students to feel like this is a space for them to grow and be heard." Greer looked around, eyes lingering on a poster of Maya Angelou. "Our community doesn't usually go in for that sort of thing." "Literature?" Monica asked. He ignored the comment. "I noticed your lesson plan includes something called culturally responsive reading circles. What exactly is that?" Monica answered simply, "It's a teaching method that helps students see themselves in the material. When they connect to stories, they learn better." He frowned. "This isn't a sociology experiment, Mrs. Harris. Stick to the curriculum. And don't try to make waves." Monica kept her face neutral. "Everything I'm doing is aligned with state standards." Greer gave a small, tight smile. "Good. Keep it that way." He left as quickly as he came, and Monica sat for a moment, her heart beating faster than she'd like. But she didn't erase the quote from the board. She didn't take down a single poster. That afternoon, she met one of her new colleagues at lunch, a soft-spoken woman who introduced herself with a kind smile. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered when no one else was nearby. "This school needs someone like you, but just be careful." Monica tilted her head. "Careful how?" The woman's smile faded a little. "Greer doesn't like change or challenge. And you don't look like the teachers he usually hires." Monica nodded slowly. "I've noticed." They sat in silence for a beat, both understanding what wasn't being said out loud. Later, during her planning period, Monica took a quiet moment to reflect. This wasn't the first school where she'd faced resistance. She knew how power worked. In places like this, quiet, closed-door power held by people with long ties to the community and short patience for new ideas. But still, she hadn't expected the tension to be this thick. Or this soon. After school, she stayed late to finish organizing her bookshelves. The hallway was nearly empty when Greer walked by again. "Working late?" he said, stepping just far enough inside to make her uncomfortable. "I like to be prepared," she said, not turning away from her bookshelf. "Well, I hope your efforts pay off," he said casually. "Though parents in this town, they prefer tradition. They don't always respond well to change." Monica turned, meeting his gaze. "I'm not here to force change. I'm here to help students learn in the best way I know how." He gave her that same tight smile again. "Just remember who's in charge, Mrs. Harris. We like our teachers. Cooperative." She didn't respond. She simply turned back to her books. After he left, she pulled out her notebook and jotted down the time, the words, her feelings. She had learned long ago, document everything, even the small things, especially the small things. At home that evening, Elijah was waiting with takeout and a tired smile. He asked about her day, and she gave him the highlights, skipping the parts about Greer for now. He had enough on his plate being the new police captain in a town that hadn't welcomed many outsiders. Instead, she told him about the posters she'd hung, the books her students would soon read, the sunlight in her room. "You're going to change that place," Elijah said, proud. "I know it." Monica smiled, but her eyes were distant. "I hope so," she said softly. "But I think I'll have to fight for it." And she would. Because for her students, for the quiet ones, the unsure ones, the ones who felt out of place the way she once had, this wasn't just a job. It was personal. It didn't take long for things to shift. By the end of the first week, Monica noticed a pattern. Small things, but consistent. Her copies at the front office were always delayed or mysteriously missing. The supplies she'd requested, basic classroom items, somehow got lost in processing. Other teachers smiled politely but kept their distance. The feeling was clear. She wasn't one of them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Still, Monica kept showing up early, smiling at every student, decorating her classroom with fresh student work. She had a purpose here, and she wasn't going to let silence push her away. On Friday morning, just before her first class, Greer appeared in her doorway again. He didn't knock. He walked in slowly, hands behind his back, eyes scanning the walls. "These posters again," he muttered. Monica kept her tone steady. "They're part of my unit on American voices in literature." "Voices?" Greer raised an eyebrow. "These seem a bit selective. They're diverse voices. Voices that haven't always had a place in classrooms like this one." Greer chuckled dryly, almost to himself. "Well, Mrs. Harris, this town has its own pace, its own expectations. You may be rushing something that doesn't need rushing." She stepped closer. "Students grow when they feel seen. That's not rushing. That's teaching." He tilted his head, a smirk playing at his lips. You city teachers always bring drama into schools. Let's just hope it doesn't distract from results." He walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Monica stared at the empty space where he stood, her fists clenched slightly. She turned back to her desk and pulled out her notebook again. Page after page now filled with small notations. "What?" he said. "When?" How he said it. This wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. A system. That afternoon, as she finished grading a stack of essays, she felt a quiet presence behind her. "I didn't mean to startle you," said a soft voice. It was the same colleague from lunch earlier in the week. She looked nervous. "No, worries," Monica said, smiling gently. "Everything okay?" The woman looked over her shoulder, then stepped inside and closed the door softly. "I just wanted to say, I saw what happened earlier. In the hallway. With him." Monica raised her eyebrows. "With Greer?" She nodded. "He did the same thing to another teacher a few years ago. She tried to report it, ended up transferred to a school an hour away, worst part of the district. Her complaint disappeared before it was even filed." Monica's stomach dropped. "He's protected," the teacher whispered. "His brother-in-law sits on the board. They all cover for each other." She took a shaky breath. "Look, I know you're new, but be careful. He picks targets, and he doesn't stop until they're gone." That night, Monica sat in her home office long after Elijah had gone to bed. Her lesson plans sat untouched beside her as she stared at her open notebook. Her mind raced. Could she keep going like this? Could she protect her students while protecting herself? Could she protect Elijah? She glanced over at a framed photo on the shelf. Elijah in his new police captain's uniform, smiling, full of pride. It was a fresh start for both of them. A chance to make real change in a place that needed it. But change was never easy, and never free. The next morning she arrived early again. She opened the classroom windows wide, letting in sunlight and fresh air. She pulled out a stack of new books. Their eyes were watching God, The Color Purple, and Brown Girl Dreaming. All voices that had once been pushed out of classrooms like this. She stood in the middle of the room and looked around. There was tension in the air. Pressure. She could feel it building, but there was also something else. Resolve. She picked up a marker and wrote across the whiteboard. Stories can change the world. Yours matters. Just as she capped the marker, she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy ones. Familiar. Greer. Again. He stepped into the room without asking, holding a clipboard. Your lesson plan for next week, he said coldly, has been flagged. Flagged by who? Monica asked, keeping her tone calm. By me. And by the curriculum supervisor, he said, though he didn't name who that was. It's too personal, too emotional. Stick to what's required. I am, Monica said, stepping closer. Every book is approved. Every standard is met. He narrowed his eyes. It's not about the books. It's about the message. There. It was. The truth hiding inside the real problem. He didn't want her stories in the room. He didn't want her in the room. Monica didn't flinch. The message is, every student matters. Every student deserves to see themselves in the story. Greer leaned in slightly. You're new here. It would be wise to follow the flow. Keep your job simple. Monica smiled, not out of amusement, but out of clarity. I've never taken the simple route. And I'm not about to start now. He stared at her for a long moment, then left in silence. She returned to her desk and opened her laptop. At the top of a new document she typed, Incident Log, Week 2. Because she wasn't just going to remember, she was going to be ready. By the third week, Monica could feel it everywhere. In the office, in the break room, in the tight smiles from other teachers. It was like walking through a fog where everyone saw what was happening, but no one wanted to say it out loud. She arrived at school early one morning to find something strange. Her classroom was different. The desks, which she had carefully arranged in small groups to encourage collaboration, were now lined up in rigid, old-fashioned rows. Her reading corner, gone. Her posters, half were missing. She stood in the doorway in silence for a moment, heart pounding. Then she walked in, searching for an explanation. On her desk sat a yellow sticky note. Custodial staff realigned room for improved order. Admin. She didn't need to guess who had ordered it. She turned slowly and looked out into the hallway. Empty, except for a custodian walking by with a mop. Excuse me, she called gently. Did you rearrange this room? The man looked uncomfortable. I was told to follow instructions. Said it came from the top. Sorry, ma'am. Monica thanked him and closed the door behind her. She stood in the middle of her now sterile classroom, holding back a wave of emotion. This wasn't about desks. It wasn't even about posters. It was about control. About someone trying to erase what she had built. She sat down at her desk and opened her notebook, writing, Oaked 10. Unauthorized reorganization of classroom. Personal materials removed. Admin did not notify or consult. Later that day, during her planning period, she walked into the copy room to print a quiz, and froze. Principal Greer was standing by the machine, flipping through a stack of her handouts. Your name's on these, he said, not looking up. Yes, Monica replied slowly. They're for my third period class. Greer raised an eyebrow. Some of this language seems charged. Resistance. Justice. Finding your voice? What are you teaching these kids, Mrs. Harris? She stepped forward. I'm teaching them how to read, how to think, how to connect literature to the world around them. He laughed, under his breath. You're turning them into little activists. I'm helping them believe they matter, she said firmly. He stepped closer than necessary. Too close. Be careful with that, he said softly. It's easy to get lost in your own message. She held her ground, refusing to flinch. I know exactly where I stand. After school, Monica met her colleague, the same quiet one who had warned her before, outside the building. "You're not imagining it," she said in a low voice. "He's escalating, and I think he's trying to push you into reacting, so he can justify getting rid of you." Monica nodded. "He's already started building a paper trail. Called me non-cooperative in a meeting last week." "That's what he does," the woman said. "He provokes, documents your response, then uses it to twist the story. He's done it before. People leave because they think it's safer, because no one believes them." Monica looked at her car parked in the far lot. A long walk, a long drive home, a longer road ahead. But her students' faces flashed in her mind, the shy ones, the curious ones, the ones who stayed after class to say, "I never liked reading until now." She wouldn't run. That night, Elijah noticed she was quieter than usual. "Long day?" he asked. She nodded, stirring her tea slowly. "Just school politics." He gave her a look, gentle but serious. "You know you don't have to protect me. If something's going on, I want to know." She smiled at him, grateful. But she shook her head. "Not yet. You've got enough to handle at the station. Let me handle this, for now." In truth, she was trying to protect him from the rage she knew he'd feel, and she wasn't ready to explain just how far it had already gone. The next day, she received a formal email from Greer's office. Meeting requested regarding concerns. With teaching approach and classroom conduct, Thursday, 2:30 p.m. The email was cold, no context, no specifics, just enough to make her worry. She printed it, filed it, and added a fresh page to her documentation folder. She made 3 copies. Then she called her old mentor from Atlanta. "I think I'm being targeted," she said simply. "And I'm not sure what my next move should be." Her mentor's voice was calm, wise. "You're doing the right thing. Document everything. But if he's getting bolder, you need someone to back you up. Someone from inside." Monica thought about that. She didn't need to be saved, but she didn't need to fight alone either. So after hanging up, she sent a quiet text to the one person she knew had seen enough. "I need your help. I think it's time to start keeping records together." And the reply came back in seconds. "Say no more. I've got your back." By Thursday, the air in Riverside High felt different. Monica stood outside the main office, holding a folder of carefully prepared documents in one hand. Inside were copies of lesson plans, email threads, and a detailed log of Greer's behavior. Dates, times, exact words. She had spent hours putting it together, going over every word twice. Not because she doubted what had happened, but because she knew she would have to make her truth undeniable. The clock on the wall ticked past 2:30 p.m. when she was finally called in. The room was dim and overly formal. A long table, 3 chairs, already occupied. Greer, of course, sat in the middle. On either side of him were 2 senior staff members she barely knew, heads of departments who barely made eye contact as she entered. "Mrs. Harris," Greer said without standing, "thank you for coming. We're here to discuss several concerns that have been raised about your classroom methods and professional conduct." Monica sat down slowly, placing her folder on the table. "Before we begin, I'd like to record this meeting for documentation purposes." Greer's jaw tightened. The others looked surprised, but no one objected. She pressed the record button on her phone. "Please continue," she said calmly. Greer cleared his throat. "We've noticed your classroom deviates significantly from the district's preferred structure. You've chosen non-standard seating arrangements, unconventional reading material, and emotionally charged teaching language. Parents have raised concerns." "Which parents?" she asked. He blinked. "We don't name individual complaints, but we take all community feedback seriously." Monica opened her folder. "Every book I've used is on the district-approved list." My lesson plans have been submitted weekly. My student engagement and assessment scores are all above the school average. One of the other staff members cleared his throat, uncomfortable. We're not questioning your passion, Mrs. Harris. We're questioning the fit. Your approach may be too progressive for this community. Monica didn't flinch. Do you mean too inclusive? Silence. Then Greer leaned forward slightly. Look, it's clear your style may work elsewhere, but here, parents expect a certain tone from our teachers. You come in, and suddenly kids are talking about identity, power, questioning the system. That's not what they're here for. Monica's voice remained steady. They're here to learn, and part of learning is thinking critically about the world. Greer's face darkened. We can do this the easy way, Mrs. Harris. Adjust your teaching, follow the model we expect, or there will be consequences. We're not looking to make this formal yet, but that's your choice. Monica closed her folder calmly. Then I'll make mine. She stood. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the school board and with the state. I've documented every incident, every warning, every time you stepped beyond your role to intimidate or discredit me. Greer chuckled under his breath. You think the board's going to listen to you? My brother-in-law is on the board. I know, she interrupted, but he's not the law, and neither are you. She walked out, heart racing. In the hallway, she pulled out her phone and sent one message. It's time. By the time she reached the parking lot, her colleague, her quiet ally, was waiting by the staff gate. You really did it, she said, eyes wide. You stood up to him. Monica smiled faintly. That was just the first step. That weekend, she spent hours finalizing her complaint. Every document was scanned, time-stamped, and saved. She didn't just send it to the local board. She sent it to the State Department of Education, the Teachers' Rights Advocacy Council, and the district superintendent directly, and she copied herself on every email. The following Monday, the school board called her in. The room was larger and colder. This time, she faced not just Greer, but 5 seated board members, including Richard Thompson, his brother-in-law. His face was unreadable. Mrs. Harris, Thompson began, folding his hands on the table. We've reviewed your complaint, and frankly, we find your interpretations problematic. Monica said nothing. He continued. What you describe as intimidation could be seen as strong leadership. Your teaching approach, while energetic, may not align with the culture here. It's not about race or bias. It's about cohesion. You're disrupting that. Monica opened her new folder. Then explain these emails, she said, sliding copies across the table. Greer questioning my appearance, my tone, even my hair. Not my teaching, not once, just how I show up in the room. Another board member shifted uncomfortably. Monica wasn't finished. Explain this staff note, left in my box, accusing me of cultural mismatch, and this unapproved classroom evaluation written 2 days after I submitted a concern about Principal Greer. You're clearly emotional, Thompson said. Maybe it's clouding your judgment. That was it. Monica leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with him. You think emotion is weakness, but it's actually what makes me strong. I care about my students. I care about justice, and I care about not being bullied into silence. You're risking your career, Mrs. Harris, he warned. She stood. No, I'm protecting it, and I'm protecting every teacher who walks in after me. She walked out of the boardroom with her shoulders squared. Outside, she found a group of students waiting near the steps. One of them, Jessica, from her 3rd period class, held a small handmade sign that read, We see you, Mrs. Harris. Monica's voice almost caught in her throat, but she smiled instead. Because even if the board didn't believe her, the people who mattered most already did. For a few days, it felt like nothing would change. Monica went to school. She taught her classes, She smiled for her students. But every step she took down those quiet hallways felt heavier. Every staff meeting where eyes avoided hers made it clear. The board had spoken, and they had chosen silence. But she wasn't done. She started documenting more. Not just Greer's behavior, but his patterns. When he entered her room without knocking, the language he used when no one else was around, how he would show up in the copy room and just stand there, saying nothing, staring. Her phone began recording the moment he entered a space. She also began speaking to former staff, teachers who had once worked at Riverside and quietly disappeared. "I wanted to stay," one of them said over the phone, her voice trembling. "But after I filed a complaint, my schedule was rearranged to only include remedial classes. They said I was no longer suited for leadership." Another shared, "He told me parents were uncomfortable with my accent. I'd been teaching English for 15 years. Monica wrote it all down. Then came the final straw. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Most students had left. Monica was tidying her classroom, the sky outside dimming into early evening. She hadn't heard anyone enter until the door clicked shut. Behind her, Greer stood there, alone. "You're not leaving yet?" he asked, stepping inside. "I have work to finish," she said, not turning. He walked closer, slow steps on the tile floor. "Still trying to play hero? Even after the board shut you down?" Monica stood still, but her voice was firm. "Please, leave my classroom." But he didn't. He kept walking. "You don't belong here, Mrs. Harris. And we both know it. You keep pushing and you'll find yourself on the wrong side of a transfer slip. Or worse." She turned to face him, heart racing. "You are crossing a line." Greer took one step closer. "It's not too late to make this easier for both of us." And then it happened. The classroom door opened again, hard this time, slamming into the wall. Standing there was Elijah, still in uniform, still holding the takeout bag he had meant to surprise her with. For a second, no one moved. Elijah's voice, calm but deep with authority, filled the room. "Take your hands off my wife." Greer stepped back instantly, the color draining from his face. "Officer Harris," he stammered. "This isn't what it looks like." Elijah walked forward, placing the bag slowly on Monica's desk. His posture was controlled, his tone even, but his eyes, those eyes held fire. You walk into her classroom after hours, you corner her. Again. You speak to her like this? He turned to Monica. "Are you okay?" She nodded silently, shaken but steady. "I have recordings," she said quietly. "From the last few weeks, from just now." "I suggest you leave," Elijah said to Greer, stepping between him and Monica. "Before this becomes something more official." Greer muttered something about misunderstanding, then practically tripped over his own feet as he exited. Elijah waited until the door was fully shut before turning to Monica. "Why didn't you tell me?" Monica sank slowly into her chair. "Because you're already fighting your own battles in this town. I didn't want to make waves for you." He sat beside her, softening. "Monica, we don't win by staying quiet. We win by standing up." She looked at him. "Then let's stand." That night, Elijah made a call to the superintendent directly, not as a husband, but as an officer of the law. He relayed what he had seen, what Monica had recorded, what other teachers had confirmed privately. And the next morning, something shifted. Sarah, Monica's quiet ally, walked into her room before the bell and said, "I sent everything to the superintendent anonymously, all the reports, all the stories from staff. I couldn't stay silent anymore." That day, Greer didn't show up at school. By noon, a memo was sent out. The district office would be conducting a formal investigation into harassment claims at Riverside High. By 3 p.m., the superintendent herself walked through the front doors. And she wasn't alone. With her were 2 compliance officers from the our state, carrying clipboards and sealed folders. They met with Monica first. She presented everything: emails, evaluations, notes, recordings. She spoke carefully, but without fear. Then they met with Sarah. Then 2 other teachers stepped forward. And by the end of the day, Greer was placed on temporary leave. As Monica gathered her things after school, a student waited quietly at the door. It was Jessica, the quiet girl from her reading group. She held something in her hand. "I made this," she said, handing over a card. It was hand-drawn, colored with pencils, slightly wrinkled. It read, "Thank you for fighting for us." Monica swallowed the lump in her throat. She smiled. "Thank you for reminding me why I do." Outside the school, teachers stood in small clusters, talking. For once, not whispering. The silence was finally cracking, and for the first time in a long time, Monica felt the air shift, not with fear, but with the beginning of change. Weeks passed since Principal Greer was escorted out of Riverside High. At first, the school halls felt like they were holding their breath. Teachers whispering in corners, students wondering what had really happened, staff members suddenly remembering things they had long buried. But then, slowly, the silence began to break. One morning, Monica walked into the front office to find a new face behind the desk. The woman smiled warmly, stood up, and introduced herself as the district-appointed interim administrator. "Mrs. Harris," she said gently, "you've been through a lot. We want to make sure you're supported. The superintendent shared your documentation with the state board. We're grateful you spoke up." Monica didn't know what to say at first. It had all happened so fast. One moment she was a target, the next, a voice. She walked down the hallway that morning and felt something she hadn't in months. Stillness. Not the tense, watchful kind, but peace. In her classroom, her students were already waiting, some chatting, some flipping through books, others doodling on paper. But when she walked in, a hush fell over the room. Jessica, the quiet one who had once doubted her own voice, looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Harris." Monica smiled back. "Good morning, everyone. Today we're talking about what it means to stand up, even when it's uncomfortable." And as she wrote those words on the board, she realized something. This wasn't just her story anymore. It belonged to all of them. The following week, something even more unexpected happened. A district-wide email went out. The Riverside School Board has been dissolved pending investigation. Richard Thompson, Greer's brother-in-law, had officially resigned. In the days that followed, messages poured in. Former teachers, retired staff, even a few parents who had quietly questioned things over the years but never felt safe speaking up. One of them wrote, "My daughter once came home crying because a teacher told her she looked unprofessional with her natural hair. I didn't report it. I was afraid. I'm not afraid anymore. Thank you for reminding us we have a voice." Elijah printed that one and pinned it to the fridge at home. "You're changing this place," he told Monica one night as they sat on the porch under the quiet Georgia stars. "And not just for the kids, for everyone." But Monica shook her head. "I didn't do it alone," she said softly. "If Sarah hadn't spoken up, if the students hadn't shown kindness, if the other teachers hadn't backed me," she paused. "I just didn't back down. That's all." But that wasn't all. Monica had done more than just stand her ground. She had challenged something deep, unspoken, accepted. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just told the truth. Day after day, and the truth had ripples. One afternoon, the new interim administrator called her in. "There's something we'd like you to consider," she said. "We're building a mentorship program for new teachers, especially teachers of color. We need someone who knows how to lead from experience, not just theory. Monica blinked. You mean me? Yes, if you're willing. She took a deep breath. Thought of her younger self, the Monica who once wondered if she'd ever belong, who kept her head down in meetings, who learned how to smile while swallowing. Injustice. And then she thought of Jessica, of her students, of all the young teachers still to come. I'm willing, she said. Word of the changes spread across the district. The old dress code was reviewed. Language about professional appearance was revised to include cultural protections. A new policy required harassment complaints to go through an independent third party, not the school board. And 1 year later, Monica stood on stage in the very same gym where Greer had once given icy opening speeches. This time, the audience looked different. The faculty was more diverse, the energy more open. Students and parents sat beside each other, and the district superintendent took the mic to thank the woman who had started it all. Monica didn't want a spotlight. She hadn't done this for applause, but as she stood before the crowd and looked out at all the faces, students, teachers, parents, she felt something deeper than pride. She felt peace. She began her short speech with a soft, but steady voice. I didn't set out to fight. I set out to teach. But sometimes doing one means having to do the other. All I wanted was a place where every student and every teacher felt like they belonged. And now, maybe we're finally on our way. The applause wasn't loud at first, but it grew. And it kept growing. Later that day, as Monica walked through the halls, she saw something that stopped her in her tracks. It was a new poster on the wall outside her classroom, a quote from Maya Angelou, printed large and proud. Still I rise. She didn't put it there. Jessica had. That evening, Monica and Elijah sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by takeout containers, laughter, and the kind of quiet that only comes after surviving a storm. You know, Elijah said, picking up a forkful of noodles. When you told me you'd handle it, I didn't know you meant all of it. Monica smiled. I didn't either, she said. But I'm glad I did. Because some stories aren't just about overcoming, they're about becoming. The person you always were, underneath the fear, beneath the silence. And Monica? She didn't just survive Riverside High. She changed it. One student, one truth, one stand at a time.